Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports. It's Friday, May 23rd, and it's Memorial Day weekend. But I had to get this video out because there's important news that couldn't wait until Tuesday. News about the 2026 election. There's a question called the generic ballot, and it's pretty important because it gives us a way to track political sentiment in the country without polling each individual congressional race, which, quite frankly, is pretty much impossible at this point. And what it says is something completely different, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, let's just take a quick stop at right direction, wrong track today. Now, today's right direction print was 48%. At this point, the high numbers are just routine. They're almost not worth talking about. It was net +1 today. Again, better than any point in our last 20 years, except for that net +4 we had a week and a half ago. But what I wanted to point out is that it isn't just our numbers. Real Clear Politics, the industry, a straight average of all of the participants in the polling industry, routinely underemphasizes right direction when Donald Trump's in office, just like they sandbag his approval rating. We've proved that over and over and over again. But even despite this sandbag, which I really do think amounts to a couple points, which is really huge. I mean, let's just not forget that even in the fall, the Real Clear Politics aggregate in the national popular vote was about 1.5 to 2 points to left. So assume the same amount of biases here, maybe more. Even though, despite that, if you look at where we're at right now, this little yellow circle on the right direction, wrong track margin is just about 1 point away from where it was back here, which is when Biden got inaugurated. Now, I can tell you that we saw nowhere near this size spike during the Biden inauguration. So again, they're sandbag, they're pro-establishment, and it's not Real Clear Politics. It's the pollsters that Clear Politics is forced to cover. But my point is that we're about a point away from surpassing that, which would mean that right direction would be better than at any point in Real Clear Politics, going all the way back to 2009, Barack Obama's inauguration. That is really stunning. When the industry tells you that things are better than they've ever been before in almost 20 years under a Trump administration, that is pretty crazy. And, approval, again, you just got to bask in this. It's back up to less than 2 points underwater. And this is disgusting. This psychological fake operation they played. They're trying to have you believe that Donald Trump went from like a point underwater in March to 7 points underwater in April. Essentially, tens of millions of people across the country all of a sudden started disapproving of Donald Trump's performance after the stock market. This is going into the first week of May, his 100-day mark. After the stock market had a little bit of a hiccup, just out of nowhere on no news, everybody's like, oh no, his approval's horrible. And then back again, his approval is fine. But there was this much of a swing in public opinion. Like you would have felt a swing like this just talking to people on the street. And it didn't exist because basically, I mean, my numbers swung around a little bit, but on average, they were flat, just like everybody else who's a good pollster. Here we have them at 50% approve today, 49% disapprove. Yeah, I mean, look at Morning Consult, even relatively agrees with us. Harvard Harris is pretty close to us. Big data poll, we have the exact same results. So this is what it was. Donald Trump's been roughly even, and it was all fake and stupid. But let's go back to 2022 and take a look at the generic ballot. Now, 2022 was an interesting one because there was supposed to be a huge red Republican wave. And I will say that going back to 2021, Republicans were leading massively in the generic ballot. The problem is the questions like if the election were held today, and the election was not held in October of 2021. And so as you get closer to elections, the numbers almost invariably get tighter as people wake up, as more people enter the electorate. And we want to see that. We want to see these swings because otherwise, I mean, the polling should reflect what an election would be like today. Otherwise, we're just trying to predict the future, which is impossible. And what happened is that massive advantage kind of disappeared a little bit. Went from, in our numbers, roughly about, I mean, we had a +11, I think, a +10, And then it eased up into the high single digits until the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. And everybody freaked out and it got a lot narrower. And a lot of women who probably weren't going to vote all of a sudden decided that they needed this abortion right that was theoretically threatened, although we've seen history will tell us that no such thing happened. And the final result was R plus 2.8. And we were at about 4 on average. Here, this is the final call, Republicans plus 5. But if you look what was going on here and look for the name Rasmussen, we got a plus 5, we got a plus 7, but we had a plus 4, a plus, where's our plus 1? We had like 2 weeks of, Republicans plus 1, Republicans plus 2, Republicans plus 4. Mode response was about 4. And the mean was there too, if you look at all of the fall. Again, it was all over the place because there was a lot of political chaos going on. And ultimately, it didn't mean much for the Republicans, a moderate pickup. But it's important to be able to nail this number. And of course, in 2024, we did nail this number. Here is the final results. Republicans plus 2.7. So notice a trend, though. Republicans have been up. 2022, it was 2.5. 2024, it's bigger, 2.7. Trump's on the ballot. But also, Trump was on the ballot in many ways in 22 as well. And for some reason, they don't have our final number up here, which is really weird. But our final number was plus 3. Here it is, Tuesday, November 5th, polling done the previous week and Sunday night. Released on election day, Republican plus 3 on the final generic ballot. Final results, Republican 2.7. We really, really nailed this one. And, if you look at going back through all the 2024 cycle, we had them up the entire time. And again, there's that narrowing, right? Back here, when it was Republicans plus 9, this was like people were not very happy with Joe Biden in January of 2024. And he got a little bit of a resurgence after his State of the Union speech. And then it really collapsed after, the switcheroo. But I think part of it was we implemented the recall vote here. And for some reason, again, there's statistical variability, right? This plus 5 might have been an outlier high. You never know. I would have liked to have pulled more. And I think we might have done a few more that weren't up there, Real Clear Politics. You might want to look. But where are we going with this? Well, here is the polling today. And it's Democrats plus 2. Now, if we go back and look at the aggregates were 3 points almost to the left in 24. And in 22, it was pretty much spot on. Although what I'll note about 22 is, this is that false IOP they run. Yeah, what really happened is probably Republicans just sort of narrowed a little bit and came back up. This is fake. It wasn't that tight. We had Republicans up this entire time. Got down to 1 plus 1, I think, once or twice in there. But anyways, back to 2026, and everybody's saying the Democrats are up. Now, everybody is New York Times, Siena, Fox News. They're horrible. And a lot of these are narrow, a lot of plus 1s. Quanta says tie, but it's worse than in 22 and in 24. And according to us, it's worse as well. Generic congressional ballot, Democrats have slim lead in the early 2026 congressional forecast. Although the next midterm elections are still more than a year away, a slender plurality of voters now favor the Democrat Party, which hopes to recapture a House majority in November of 26. All right, here we are. It's 1,000 likely voters. In the fall, we were putting out about 2,500 likely voters for the generic ballots, I think. I would like this to be a larger sample, but we got to put our stories out. And so there's a plus or minus 3% margin of error, but Democrats are plus 1. Probably statistical noise. And this trend of Republicans being up by about 2.5 is it's kind of outside that margin of error, but not by much. So it could be noise. The real mean still could be Republicans plus 2.5, but it doesn't feel like it. Doesn't feel like it to me. And so there's a paradox where we have higher right direction than at any time in our polling, and yet Republicans are doing worse. And I'm going to go ahead and surmise that that's because they're being perceived to be obstructionist towards Trump's agenda. And we have polling that supports that. Remember, 60% of Republicans said that Republicans in Congress were not doing enough to enact Donald Trump's mandate. So, I mean, the contextual polling tells me that the Republicans need to do better. And look at this, though. Women are going Democrat by 10 points. There's something going on with women right now, and it's not abortion. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's just the generic orange man stuff. Independents are still +7 Republicans, and actually there's a crossover advantage to Democrats, believe it or not. Does this mean that, listen, I think we'll probably see Republicans up again, and there's been a trend of the generic ballot being less predictive of what actually happens in the race because of all of this extra counting that happens and things along those lines. Listen, gerrymandering also plays a big role, as does really fundraising and advertisement. And so this might not mean a lot, but it's a really important tracker, and it's one we're going to be following. Now, I don't think we're going to continue to see a leftward shift to the Democrats like we've had over the last two cycles. If anything, it's probably going to hang here, and there will probably be something very big and symbolic that happens between now and then, and it'll push the pendulum. Do I think the Republicans are going to fall prey to another Supreme Court style Dobbs decision? I don't think so. I think we've seen some pretty big decisions out of the Supreme Court already. I think maybe people are getting desensitized to that, but there could be something big and symbolic on either side. You never really know. Maybe it's all of these people that Trump's going to go after now. It looks like those just referred 150 congressional representatives to the IRS for audits. And Doge said that if they found something criminal, they're going to rat these people out. Turns out like 95% of them are Democrats. That could swing the balance of power for sure. How likely is it that you will vote in next year's midterm congressional elections? 75% say very likely. They're lying. Turnout's going to be probably a lot less than that. But Democrats are less likely to say very likely. And so this might make it up. This might be all of the difference here. And independents are always less likely, but it's still a really high number for independents. But do we have this out in the crosstabs here? We do. This one. Among people who say they're very likely to vote in the midterms, Democrats are actually +2. People who say somewhat likely, Republicans are up 4. So it's this trend that Rich Barris has pointed out, and I've been following as well, where Republicans are now doing way better nationally from a registration perspective, but they're also now more of the low propensity voter. They need to turn out more people, and then this will go better for Republicans. And I thought this was interesting too. You never know what you're going to get. Does it make much difference whether Republicans or Democrats are in charge of Congress? 72% actually say yes, only 16% say no. That's a lot less cynical than I would have thought. And Republicans are the big number here, 81%, 75% of Democrats, and only 58% of independents. But still, that's a lot higher than I thought there. So we'll see how this plays out. There's new stuff that might happen. This was a fascinating report from yesterday. Representative Byron Donalds says Doge cuts will be next after President Trump's big, beautiful bill clears the Senate. And there will probably be some changes to the bill in the Senate. I hope they're for the better because Republicans really need to pay attention to this polling. People are telling you that you're not doing enough. They think the country's headed in the right direction and you're being perceived to be standing in the way. Not a good place to be. And if you want to watch more of an honest pollster, check out my segment yesterday on Alex Jones. I was on for an entire hour and it was absolutely wild. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about boomers, we talked about wealth transfer and the kleptocracy, and we even got into our recent polling on chemtrails. I guarantee you, we're the only people that would ask a question like that. And the results were very surprising. So go check it out. If you've learned something, please follow us at rasmussenreports.com, Rasmussen_poll at Twitter. Follow us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Mark_R_Mitchell at Twitter. And thanks for watching.